You walk past them every single day. The invisible people, the ones emptying the trash, mopping the floors, fading into the background. You think you know their story. But what if the person cleaning the blood off the floor knows more about saving a life than the doctor holding the scalpel? In 2024, at a chaotic veterans hospital in Seattle, a janitor named Evelyn did the unthinkable. When a young soldier's heart stopped and the surgeons froze, she didn't just call for help, she took the blade. This is the story of the hidden hero who broke every rule to pay a debt to the dead. You won't believe who she really was. The smell of St. Jude's Veterans Hospital was a specific cocktail of pine-scented cleaner, stale coffee, and despair. It was the kind of smell that settled into your pores and refused to leave, no matter how many showers you took. Evelyn Cross adjusted her grip on the mop handle, her knuckles white. She was 42, though the grey streaks in her messy bun and the deep lines etched around her eyes made her look 10 years older. To the staff of St. Jude S, she was just Evie, the woman who cleaned up the vomit in the waiting room, the woman who emptied the biohazard bins without complaining, the woman who never made eye contact. "Hey, you missed a spot," a voice barked. Evelyn didn't flinch. She knew the voice. Dr. Greg Sterling, 35 years old, Ivy League education, and enough arrogance to fill the entire trauma wing. He was the attending surgeon on the night shift, a man who treated the nurses like waitresses and the janitorial staff like furniture. Evelyn slowly moved her mop over the scuff mark on the linoleum. "Got it, doctor," she murmured, her voice raspy. "Make sure you do. We have a frantic night ahead. I don't want to be slipping on your incompetence while I'm trying to save lives," Sterling sneered, adjusting his pristine white coat before pushing through the double doors of the ER. Evelyn watched him go, her eyes narrowing slightly. If only he knew. She pushed the bucket cart towards the supply closet, her left leg dragging slightly, a souvenir from a roadside IED outside of Kandahar in 2018. The pain was a constant companion, a dull roar in her hip that spiked whenever it rained. But she took nothing for it. The pain kept her grounded. It reminded her why she was here, hiding in plain sight, scrubbing floors in the very system that had chewed her up and spit her out. In the supply closet, Evelyn collapsed onto a stack of cardboard boxes. She pulled a worn, leather-bound notebook from the pocket of her oversized blue jumpsuit. It was filled with names, dates, dosages, procedures. It wasn't a diary. It was a log. For the past 6 months, Evelyn had been watching. She noticed that Mrs. Gable in bed 4 was being given the wrong dosage of heparin. She noticed that the sterile fields in trauma room 2 were being compromised by lazy interns. She noticed everything because nobody noticed her. "Evie?" She shoved the notebook away and stood up, grabbing a spray bottle. "Here, Sarah." Sarah Jenkins, the head trauma nurse, poked her head in. Sarah was the only bright spot in this purgatory. She was a veteran herself, a former Air Force medic who actually gave a damn. Coffee pot in the break room exploded. "Again," Sarah sighed, blowing a stray hair out of her face. "And we just got a call. Inbound medevac. 3 Humvees involved in a training accident at Lewis McCord. It's going to be a bloodbath." "I'll handle the coffee," Evelyn said, keeping her head down. "You okay, Evie? You look pale." Sarah paused, looking at the janitor with genuine concern. "Just the fumes," Evelyn lied. "Go, get ready for the inbound." As Sarah rushed off, the overhead speakers crackled to life. Code Blue Trauma 1, ETA 2 minutes, multiple severe crush injuries. Dr. Sterling to Trauma 1. Evelyn felt that familiar itch in her fingers, the phantom weight of a scalpel, the adrenaline surge that used to define her existence. She closed her eyes and took a breath. "You are dead," she told herself. Major Evelyn Cross, Chief of Trauma Surgery, 101st Airborne, died in that inquiry 4 years ago. You are just Evie. You cleaned the floor. But as the sirens wailed outside, growing louder, drowning out the hum of the hospital, Evelyn knew tonight would be different. The air felt heavy, charged. She grabbed her bucket and stepped out into the hallway just as the double doors burst open. The chaos that followed was a choreography she knew better than her own heartbeat. Paramedics shouting vitals, nurses cutting off uniforms, the metallic tang of blood hitting the air. Male, 22. Blunt force trauma to the chest. BP is 60/40 and dropping, a paramedic yelled, straddling the gurney as he performed compressions. Evelyn pressed herself against the wall to let the stampede pass. As the gurney flew by, she caught a glimpse of the soldier's face. He was young, terrifyingly young, and he was drowning in his own blood. She looked towards the trauma bay. Dr. Sterling was there, shouting at a nurse because his favorite playlist wasn't connecting to the Bluetooth speaker. "Priorities, doctor," Sarah yelled at him, hooking the patient up to the monitors. "He's crashing." Evelyn didn't move. She couldn't. She stared at the monitor visible through the glass doors. The rhythm was erratic. Ventricular tachycardia. He needs a thoracotomy, Evelyn thought, the diagnosis flashing in her mind instantly. His pericardium is filling with blood. He's in cardiac tamponade. If Sterling doesn't drain it in the next 60 seconds, that boy is dead. She gripped her mop handle, her knuckles turning white again. "Don't do it, Evie. Stay in the shadows." But then the soldier on the table turned his head. Through the pain, through the shock, his eyes locked onto hers through the glass. It was a look she had seen 1,000 times in the dust of Afghanistan. A look that said, "Help me." Evelyn dropped the mop. The crash of the mop handle hitting the floor echoed like a gunshot, but nobody heard it over the screaming monitors. Inside Trauma 1, Dr. Sterling was panicking. He wouldn't show it. His narcissism wouldn't allow it. But Evelyn could see the telltale signs. The slight tremor in his hands, the sheen of sweat on his upper lip. He was hesitating. "I can't get a pulse," Sarah shouted, her hands flying across the crash cart. "Pressure is bottoming out. Sterling, do something." "I'm assessing," Sterling snapped, looking at the ultrasound screen which was obscured by glare. I think it's a tension pneumothorax. Give me a needle, 14 gauge. "No," Evelyn whispered from the hallway. She took a step forward. "Needle decompression," Sterling ordered. He jammed the needle into the soldier's chest, a hiss of air. But the vitals didn't improve. In fact, the heart rate monitor began to scream a flatline warning tone. "It's not working. He's arresting," Sarah yelled. "Starting compressions." "Damn it!" Sterling threw the needle into a tray. "Get the defib pads. Charge to 200. "You can't shock a tamponade, you idiot," Evelyn growled under her breath. The fluid around the heart was squeezing it to death. Electricity wouldn't fix a plumbing problem. The kid needed a hole in his chest, and he needed it now. Evelyn looked around. The hallway was empty. The security guard was down at the vending machines. She walked. She didn't run. Running drew attention. She walked with the purposeful, terrifying stride of a commanding officer. She pushed through the double doors of Trauma 1. "Get out!" Sterling barked without looking up, assuming it was a confused orderly. "Clear the room!" Evelyn ignored him. She walked straight to the instrument tray. Her eyes scanned the metal tools, scalpel, rib spreader, clamps. "I said get out!" Sterling turned, his face red. "You? The janitor? Are you out of your mind? Get the hell out of my OR before I have security. Throw you through a window." "He has cardiac tamponade," Evelyn said. Her voice was different now. The rasp was gone. It was cold, clear, and authoritative. "Look at the jugular distension. Look at the narrowing pulse pressure before he crashed. You missed it." Sterling blinked, stunned by the audacity. "Excuse me?" "Move," Evelyn said. She didn't ask. "Security!" Sterling screamed. "Get this crazy woman out of here!" Two orderlies appeared at the door, hesitating. "He's dead if you don't open him up," Evelyn said, locking eyes with Sarah. "Sarah, look at the monitor. Electrical activity but no pulse. PEA. It's tamponade. If you shock him again, you're just cooking a corpse." Sarah looked at the monitor, then at Evelyn. She saw something in the janitor's eyes. Not madness. Competence. "Dr. Sterling," Sarah said urgently. She might be right. The veins in his neck. "I am the surgeon here," Sterling roared, grabbing the defibrillator paddles. "Clear." Beep. Beep. No. Evelyn lunged. She didn't shove the doctor. She used a precise, military combative move, catching his wrist and twisting the paddle away from the patient's chest. Sterling yelped, dropping the paddle. "You're fired! You're in jail!" Sterling shrieked, backing away, clutching his wrist. "Security, arrest her!" The orderlies rushed in, grabbing Evelyn by the arms. "Let me go!" Evelyn struggled. But they were big men. "He's dying, look at him!" "Get her out!" Sterling was shaking now, more from rage than fear. "And charge the paddles again!" As the orderlies dragged Evelyn backward, the patient's body gave a violent convulsion. "Wait!" A voice boomed from the doorway. Everyone froze. Standing there, leaning on a cane, was an older man in a civilian suit, but with a bearing that screamed military. It was General Arthur Hayes. The hospital administrator was cowering behind him. "That soldier," the general said, pointing a trembling finger at the table. "That is my son." The room went deathly silent. "General, please," Sterling stammered, putting on his best grieving face. "We are doing everything we can. But your son has sustained massive injuries. We need to clear the room to proceed." The general ignored Sterling. He looked at Evelyn, who was still being held by the orderlies. He looked at her dirty blue jumpsuit, her grey hair, her desperate eyes. Then he looked at her hands. Evelyn stopped struggling. She looked straight at the general, General Hayes. "Your son is drowning in his own blood. This man is treating a collapsed lung. If he doesn't cut the pericardium in the next 30 seconds, Tyler is gone." The general's eyes widened. "How do you know his name?" "I don't," Evelyn said softly. "But I know the injury. I saw it in Fallujah. I saw it in the Korangal. Let me work." "She's a janitor, General," Sterling protested. "She's delusional." The monitor let out a long, high-pitched whine. "Flatline. He's gone," Sterling said, bowing his head theatrically. "Time of death." "Not yet," Evelyn screamed. She ripped her arm free from the distracted orderly. She didn't look at the general for permission. She didn't look at Sterling. She lunged for the tray, grabbed the #10 scalpel, and vaulted onto the step stool. "Stop her!" Sterling yelled. "Let her work!" General Hayes roared, stepping in front of the orderlies, blocking them with his cane. Evelyn didn't hear them. The world narrowed down to a 4-inch square on the soldier's chest. No anesthesia. No time. She slashed the skin between the ribs, a precise, brutal incision. Blood welled up, dark and angry. "Retract her!" she commanded. She didn't look to see who handed it to her. Sarah, shaking but functioning on instinct, slapped the metal into Evelyn's palm. Evelyn cranked the ribs open. There it was. The pericardial sac was tense, purple, bulging like a water balloon about to burst. "Forceps! Scissors!" Snip. It was like lancing a boil. Dark blood exploded out of the sac, splashing across Evelyn's face and the blue jumpsuit. The pressure release was instant. "Internal paddles," Evelyn ordered. She reached her gloved hand inside the soldier's chest, grabbing the still heart. It was warm, slippery, and terrifyingly still. "Come on," she whispered. She squeezed. Massage. Release. Massage. Release. "Come on, Marine. Don't you quit on me." The room was silent except for the squelch of the manual massage. Sterling was pressed against the wall, pale as a sheet. The general was weeping silently. "Charge internal to 10, Evelyn said. Sarah handed her the sterile paddles. Evelyn placed them directly on the heart muscle. Clear. Thump, the body jerked. Evelyn watched the heart. It gave a flutter, then a twitch, then a strong, rhythmic contraction. Ba-bum. On the monitor, a green line spiked up. Then another, then a steady rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. "Sinus rhythm," Sarah breathed, tears streaming down her face. "He's back. "Oh my God, he's back!" Evelyn didn't celebrate. She quickly clamped the bleeder on the heart muscle, a nick in the ventricle. 2-0 proline suture, now. For the next 20 minutes, the janitor ran the trauma room. She sutured the heart, placed a chest tube, and stabilized the pressure. Her hands, rough from years of scrubbing floors with harsh chemicals, moved with the elegance of a concert pianist. When she finally pulled her hands out and stripped off the bloody gloves, the patient was stable. Evelyn stepped down from the stool. She felt the adrenaline crash hit her like a physical blow. She wiped the blood from her cheek with her sleeve, leaving a streak of red. She looked up. The entire room was staring at her. The nurses, the orderlies, the general, and Dr. Sterling, who looked like he was about to vomit. "He needs to go to the ICU," Evelyn said, her voice returning to the rasp of the janitor. "Watch his output. Check for coagulopathy." She turned to leave, head down, reaching for her mop bucket, which was still propping the door open. "Wait," General Hayes said. His voice cracked. Evelyn stopped, her hand on the doorframe. "Who are you?" the general asked. "No janitor does a bedside thoracotomy." Evelyn didn't turn around. "Just someone doing their job, sir." She walked out into the hallway, picked up her mop, and started cleaning the trail of blood she had left on the floor. But the story wasn't over. In fact, the nightmare was just beginning. Because as Evelyn rounded the corner towards the elevators, she saw a face on the wall-mounted TV in the waiting room. It was a news report about a memorial service. Today marks 4 years since the tragic tragedy at Bagram Airfield and the disgrace of Major Evelyn Cross, the butcher of Bagram. Evelyn froze. Dr. Sterling had followed her out. He was standing 10 feet away, holding his phone up, recording her. He looked at the TV, then at Evelyn, then back at his phone. A slow, malicious smile spread across his face. "Major Cross," Sterling whispered, the realization dawning on him. "The woman who killed a senator's daughter on the table. You're supposed to be in prison." Evelyn gripped the mop handle. "I'm going to be famous," Sterling hissed, hitting post on the video he'd just taken. "And you're going back to hell." Evelyn didn't take the elevator. She took the stairs, ignoring the screaming protest of her damaged hip. She hit the basement level, bursting into the locker room. Her hands, still trembling slightly from the procedure, fumbled with the combination lock. She needed to run. Again. She grabbed her ratty coat and her canvas tote bag. Inside was $300 in cash and a burner phone. It was enough to get a bus ticket 3 states over, to disappear into another nameless town, another invisible job. But as she reached the employee exit, her own phone, the real one she rarely turned on, buzzed in her pocket. Then it buzzed again, and again, until it was a continuous vibration against her thigh. She pulled it out. The screen was flooded with notifications, news alerts, social media tags, text messages from numbers she didn't recognize. "Is this you? OMG. Baby killer." They found her in Seattle. She clicked the first link. It was a Twitter post that already had 50,000 retweets. The caption read, "The butcher of Bagram caught hiding as a janitor at St. Jude's VA. Just assaulted a doctor and sliced open a patient. Where is security?" The video was shaky, shot vertically on a phone. It showed the chaotic aftermath in Trauma 1. It showed Evelyn, wild-eyed, blood smeared across her face and blue jumpsuit, shouting at Dr. Sterling while holding a bloody scalpel. It didn't show the saved life. It didn't show the beating heart. It only showed what looked like a deranged cleaning woman attacking a decorated surgeon. Evelyn leaned against the cold concrete wall of the alleyway behind the hospital, the winter air biting her lungs. It was over. 4 years of hiding, of swallowing her pride, of enduring the pain, gone in 60 seconds. Inside the hospital, the situation was spiraling. Dr. Greg Sterling was holding court in the main lobby, surrounded by quickly assembled news crews. He looked shaken, brave, and utterly wronged. "It was terrifying," Sterling told a reporter from Channel 4, dabbing his forehead with a handkerchief. "We were managing a critical patient." Suddenly this member of the custodial staff, Evie, we just knew her as Evie, burst in. She was incoherent, screaming about Afghanistan. She physically assaulted me, twisted my wrist, and grabbed a non-sterile scalpel. But didn't she perform a thoracotomy? Didn't she save the patient? Asked a sharp-eyed female reporter. Sterling scoffed, a masterful look of incredulity crossing his face. Save him? She nearly killed him with an unindicated, reckless mutilation performed in a non-sterile environment. The patient survived despite her assault because my team and I were able to stabilize him after security removed her. She is a dangerous individual, and now we know why. She's Major Evelyn Cross, the woman who butchered Senator Sterling's daughter. He let the connection hang in the air. The reporters gasped. The narrative was set. The hero doctor versus the disgraced PTSD-ridden killer hiding in their midst. Up in the ICU, Sarah Jenkins was watching the news report on a mounted television near the nurses' station. She was shaking with rage. "That's a lie," she said loudly. "That is a damn lie. He was freezing up. The kid was dead. Evie brought him back." "Sarah, quiet," the charge nurse hissed, looking nervously at the hospital administrators huddling in the corner with lawyers. "The narrative is already set. Don't torpedo your career for a janitor, especially that janitor." Sarah looked through the glass into the ICU room. Tyler Hayes, the general's son, was hooked up to a dozen machines, but his chest was rising and falling smoothly. He was alive because a woman named Evelyn Cross broke every rule in the book. In the private waiting room adjoining the ICU, General Arthur Hayes sat like a stone statue. He watched the news report on mute. He saw the face of the woman who had saved his son. The butcher. "General," his aide whispered, holding out a tablet. "The Pentagon briefing on Major Cross. It's extensive. Dishonorable discharge pending review. Stripped of rank. Accused of gross negligence, resulting in the death of First Lieutenant Cara Sterling at Bagram Airfield in 2020. The general looked at the tablet, then at his sleeping son. He remembered the look in Evelyn's eyes. It wasn't madness, it was the absolute, chilling clarity of command under fire. He remembered the way she handled that heart, with reverence. "Cara Sterling," the general murmured. "Senator William Sterling's daughter." "Yes, sir, and Dr. Greg Sterling downstairs. That's the senator's son. Cara's brother." The general's eyes narrowed. The pieces clicked together with the sickening thud of artillery loading. A disgraced surgeon hiding as a janitor in the hospital where the brother of her alleged victim worked. And now, that brother was controlling the narrative that would send her to prison for life. "Get me the raw footage from the trauma room security cameras," the general ordered, his voice low and dangerous. "Sir, the hospital administrator said the cameras in Trauma 1 were malfunctioning during the incident," the aide replied nervously. The general stood up, leaning heavily on his cane. "Malfunctioning my ass. This smells like a cover-up. And I hate the smell of bullshit almost as much as I hate the smell of cordite. Find Major Cross before the police do, and bring her to me." Evelyn didn't run 3 states away. She couldn't. Her hip had locked up completely by the time she reached the bus station, the cold, damp air turning the old shrapnel injury into a nexus of blinding agony. She retreated to a sanctuary, a 300-square-foot basement apartment in a run-down complex near the industrial district. It smelled of mildew and cheap ramen noodles. It held no personal items, no photos, no awards. Just a cot, a hot plate, and the ghosts she carried with her. She sat on the edge of the cot, staring at the floor. She didn't turn on the lights. The blue glow of her blowing-up phone illuminated the small tin box she kept under the floorboard beneath her bed. She opened it. Inside wasn't money or drugs. It was a Silver Star medal, tarnished, and a picture of a smiling young woman in flight gear, Lieutenant Cara Sterling. Evelyn touched the photo. "I tried, Cara," she whispered to the empty room. "I tried so hard." The pain in her hip was becoming unbearable, blurring the lines between past and present. The smell of mildew faded, replaced by the smell of burning JP-8 jet fuel and pulverized Afghan dust. Flashback, Bagram Airfield, Afghanistan, August 2020. The heat was a physical weight, 110 degrees in the shade, but there was no shade on the tarmac. Major Evelyn Cross, Chief of Trauma, stood outside the canvas flaps of the CSH, Combat Support Hospital, squinting against the glare. "Where is that inbound, Sergeant?" she yelled over the roar of an outgoing C-130. "10 mics out, Major. They took heavy fire during the extraction. VIP on board. Senator Sterling's daughter is the pilot." Evelyn felt a pit in her stomach. VIPs meant politics. Politics meant delays. Delays meant death in her line of work. Senator William Sterling was visiting Bagram on a fact-finding mission, which mostly involved shaking hands for photo ops while slowing down actual operations. The Black Hawk came in hot, trailing smoke. It hit the tarmac hard, bouncing once before skidding to a halt. The medics were already sprinting. When they pulled Lieutenant Cara Sterling from the cockpit, Evelyn knew it was too late. The flight suit was soaked in blood from a catastrophic neck wound. Shrapnel had missed her body armor. They ran her into the trauma bay anyway. Evelyn took the lead. No breath sounds, trachea deviated left. "Massive hemorrhage," Evelyn called out, her hands moving automatically. She looked into Cara Sterling's eyes. They were fixed and dilated. "She's down, Major. She's been down for at least 15 minutes, Captain Davies, her second-in-command, said quietly. Evelyn knew the protocols. In a mass casualty situation, which this was fast becoming, as the rest of Cara's crew was unloaded, you don't waste resources on the dead. You triage. "Call it," Davies said. Before Evelyn could speak, the tent flaps burst open. Senator William Sterling strode in, surrounded by a phalanx of aides and military brass. He was spotless, his khaki vest pressed. "Where is she? Where is my daughter?" the senator demanded. He saw Cara on the table. He saw the stillness. "Fix her! Do something!" "Senator, please step back," Evelyn said, her voice tight. "We are assessing." "Don't assess me, Major. That is my daughter. Operate. Code her. Do whatever you have to do." He was hysterical, grabbing Evelyn's scrub top. The cameras that had been following him all day were now pointed into the trauma bay, capturing a father's raw grief, but also compromising the sterile field and creating chaos. Evelyn looked at the monitor. Flatline, asystola. For 20 minutes. "Senator, I am so sorry," Evelyn said, placing a hand over the monitor to block the view. "She's gone. Her injuries were incompatible with life." The senator went rigid. His face turned a terrifying shade of purple. "You didn't even try. You're just standing there. You incompetent bitch. You let her die because you didn't want to get your hands dirty. Sir, she was DOA. The transport was delayed because your entourage cleared the airspace for your arrival," Evelyn said, the exhaustion making her reckless with the truth. The silence in the tent was absolute. The senator looked at the cameras, which had captured her accusation. His grief instantly calcified into pure political rage. "You're finished, Major," he hissed, leaning in so only she could hear. "I will bury you. You were drunk, you were high. You hesitated. That's the story. And nobody beats me." The inquiry lasted 3 months. It was a kangaroo court. Medical records were altered. Witnesses, like Captain Davies, were suddenly transferred to bases in Greenland or silenced with threats to their pensions. Senator Sterling, a powerful member of the Armed Services Committee, pulled every string. Evelyn was painted as a burnt-out, opioid-addicted cowboy surgeon who froze under pressure and let a hero die. They stripped her of her rank. They took her medical license. They didn't send her to Leavenworth only because they didn't want a public trial where she might speak. They just destroyed her and left her to rot. Present day. Evelyn snapped back to reality as a siren wailed outside her apartment window. Blue and red lights sliced through the darkness of her basement unit. They were here. She stood up, the pain in her hip blinding. She grabbed the go bag. She grabbed the tin box. Someone pounded on the flimsy door. "Evelyn Cross, this is the Seattle Police Department. Open up." She looked at the small egress window, high on the back wall. It was her only way out. It opened into an alleyway used for garbage collection. "Open the door, or we will kick it in." Evelyn shoved the tin box into her bag. She dragged a chair beneath the window. Every movement was agony. She climbed up, pushing the window open. The cold air hit her wet face. Crash! The front door splintered open. Flashlight beams cut through the dust. "Freeze! Hands where I can see them!" Evelyn didn't freeze. With a grunt of effort that felt like tearing her own body in half, she hauled herself through the small window and tumbled out onto the asphalt of the alley, landing hard on her bad hip. She screamed into her sleeve. "She's out the back! Go, go!" Evelyn scrambled to her feet, limping into the shadows, a fugitive once again. But this time the whole world was watching, and the man whose life she had saved back in the desert, the man whose son she had just saved tonight, was the only person who might have the power and the will to stop running and start fighting back. If General Hayes could find her before the police, or worse, before Greg Sterling got to her, maybe the dead could finally rest. But as Evelyn limped into the night, she knew the odds were worse than any battlefield she'd ever stood on. The city of Seattle transformed at night. The gleaming tech towers and coffee shops faded into a labyrinth of rain-slicked alleyways and shadows. For Evelyn Cross, this was familiar terrain. Not the city itself, but the act of survival. She limped through the Pioneer Square district, her hip screaming with every step. The adrenaline had long since metabolized, leaving behind a cold, shaking exhaustion. She needed to get off the streets. The police scanners would be buzzing with her description. White female, mid-40s, dangerous, mental instability. She found temporary refuge in a 24-hour laundromat. The attendant was asleep in the back. Evelyn huddled in the corner near the dryers, the warmth seeping into her frozen bones. She pulled her hood low. She had to think. Running was a short-term tactic, not a strategy. She had no car, limited cash, and her face was trending on every social media platform in the Western Hemisphere. "They will find me," she realized. "It's a matter of hours." Back at St. Jude's Hospital, the hunt was taking a different form. General Arthur Hayes had commandeered the hospital administrator's office. He hadn't asked. He had simply walked in, flanked by 2 military police officers he had summoned from the nearby base, and sat down. "General, this is highly irregular," the administrator, a nervous man named Mr. Henderson, stammered. "This is a civilian hospital. You have no jurisdiction here." "My son is lying in your ICU," Hayes said, his voice like gravel grinding in a mixer. "That gives me a vested interest. And since the woman who saved him is being hunted like a dog, based on the word of a man I wouldn't trust to peel potatoes, I am making jurisdiction." Hayes pointed his cane at the administrator. "Now, the security footage from Trauma 1. You said it malfunctioned. I want to talk to your IT director. Now." 10 minutes later, a young, terrified IT technician named Kevin was standing before the general. "Kevin," the general said softly, "I have grandchildren older than you. I want you to be honest with me. Did the cameras malfunction?" Kevin looked at Mr. Henderson, then at the imposing general, then at the floor. "No, sir." "Kevin!" Henderson barked. "They didn't," Kevin blurted out. "Dr. Sterling asked me to delete the file. He said it was, sensitive patient privacy. He said if I didn't, he'd have me fired. But I made a backup," the general smiled. It was a cold, predatory smile. "You're a good man, Kevin. Show me." They watched the footage on the administrator's large monitor. It was high definition, crystal clear. They saw the chaos. They saw Sterling freeze. They saw him fumbling with the needle, sweating, panicking. Then they saw Evelyn. On the screen, she didn't look like a janitor. She moved with a frightening economy of motion. The way she disarmed Sterling wasn't an assault. It was a neutralization of a threat to the patient, The thoracotomy was brutal, yes, but precise. The general, a veteran of 3 wars, knew what competence looked like. He watched her massage his son's heart. He watched her stitch the wound. He watched Dr. Sterling pull out his phone and record her only after the danger had passed. She didn't attack him, Hayes whispered. She relieved him of command. He turned to the administrator. Where is Dr. Sterling now? He's in the press room, Henderson said, sweating. Senator Sterling just arrived. They're giving a joint statement. The general stood up. Let's go. Downstairs, the press room was packed. Senator William Sterling, looking every bit the grieving yet stoic statesman, stood at the podium. His son, Greg, stood beside him, arm in a sling that he definitely didn't need. My friends, the senator intoned, his voice rich and practiced, it is a tragedy that our veterans are so often left behind by the system. This woman, Major Cross, is a symbol of that failure. Broken by war, drug-addled, dangerous. Tonight, she attacked my son, a dedicated surgeon, in a psychotic episode. We must find her before she hurts anyone else. She nearly killed the patient, Greg added, stepping up to the mic. If I hadn't stepped in to stabilize the situation, liar. The word wasn't shouted. It was spoken with quiet, absolute authority from the back of the room. The cameras turned. General Hayes stood there. He didn't look at the press. He looked straight at the senator. General Hayes, the senator smiled tightly. We are all relieved your son is stable. My son Greg here. Your son Greg, Hayes interrupted, walking slowly towards the podium, the crowd parting for him, is a coward. And you are a fraud, William. The room erupted in whispers. General, you are emotional, the senator said, his smile faltering. We can discuss this in private. No, Hayes said. We will discuss it now. You buried the truth about Bagram to save your poll numbers. And now you're trying to bury the woman who saved my son, to save your son's reputation. It ends tonight. Hayes turned to the cameras. The police are looking for the wrong person. The woman you know as the janitor is the finest combat surgeon this country has ever produced, and I am going to find her before you do. He walked out, leaving the senator stunned in the glare of the flashbulbs. But Hayes knew the clock was ticking. He had bought Evelyn time, but he hadn't bought her safety. The police had their orders. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. A private contractor. A tracker. Find her, Hayes said. Do not engage. Just give me the coordinates, and bring a medic. She's hurt. Evelyn didn't make it through the night in the laundromat. The attendant woke up and threatened to call the cops. She was back on the street at 3 a.m. Her body was shutting down. The infection in her hip, aggravated by the fall and the damp cold, was sending spikes of fever through her system. She was hallucinating now. The streetlights looked like tracer rounds. The sound of a passing car sounded like a Black Hawk rotor. Just lay down, a voice whispered in her head. Just stop, Evie. It's easier. She stumbled into a construction site near the waterfront. It was fenced off, but she found a gap. She crawled inside a half-finished concrete structure, curling up on a pile of insulation. She closed her eyes. Major Cross. Her eyes snapped open. It wasn't a dream. Standing over her was Sarah Jenkins, the nurse from the trauma unit. She was wearing a thick coat and holding a flashlight. Behind her stood General Hayes. How? Evelyn croaked, trying to sit up, but failing. You left your burner phone on, Sarah said gently, kneeling beside her. I tracked the signal. I knew you wouldn't leave the city. You don't run from a fight, do you? Evelyn looked at the general. She expected handcuffs. She expected anger. Instead, the general took off his expensive wool coat and draped it over her shivering body. We need to get her to a hospital, Sarah said, checking Evelyn's pulse. She's burning up. Septic. No hospital, Evelyn rasped. Police. They'll arrest me. Let them try, Hayes growled. Sarah, can you stabilize her here, or at a safe house? I have a kit, Sarah said, opening her bag. I can start antibiotics and fluids. but she needs rest. They moved her, not to a hospital, but to the General's private residence, a secluded estate on the outskirts of the city. It was a fortress. For 2 days, Evelyn drifted in and out of consciousness. She saw Sarah changing her IVs. She saw the General sitting in the armchair by the window, reading files, watching her. When she finally woke up and the fever had broken, it was morning. The room was bright and clean. It smelled of lavender, not antiseptic. She sat up. Her hip was bandaged properly. She was wearing clean pajamas. The General was there. He closed his file and looked at her. "You've been asleep for 48 hours, he said. "My job," Evelyn started. "You're fired," Hayes said dryly. "But I think you're overqualified for custodial work anyway." He stood up and walked to the bedside. He looked older than he had in the hospital. The weight of what he had learned was heavy on him. "I watched the footage, Evelyn. All of it. The footage from my son's surgery, and—" He paused, his voice trembling slightly. "I pulled the classified satellite logs from Bagram, August 14th, 2020. Evelyn froze. "You couldn't? Those are sealed. Senate Intelligence Committee only." "I have friends in low places," Hayes said. "I know the senator delayed the transport. I know the airspace was closed for his photo op. I know his daughter was dead before she hit your table." Evelyn looked down at her hands. "He needed a villain. I was the chief of trauma. It was my table. My responsibility." "So you took the fall," Hayes said. "You let them destroy your life to protect the memory of his daughter? Or to protect the military from a scandal?" "Cara Sterling was a hero," Evelyn whispered. "If the truth came out, that her own father's vanity killed her, it would have destroyed her legacy. It would have turned her death into a political circus. I thought if I just took the blame, she could rest in peace. And the senator, he promised he would fund better armor for the pilots if I went quietly." The General slammed his hand on the nightstand, making Evelyn jump. "He lied!" Hayes roared. "He didn't fund anything. He cut the budget 6 months later. He used you, Evelyn. He chewed you up, spit you out, and laughed all the way to re-election. And now he's doing it again with his son." Hayes pulled a tablet from his jacket. "Look at this." He showed her a news clip. It was from that morning. Breaking. "Senator Sterling calls for immediate court-martial of rogue janitor. Claims she stole narcotics from the hospital." "They're planting evidence now," Hayes said. "They found fentanyl in your locker, which I know you didn't put there." Evelyn laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "I don't even take Tylenol, General. I need the pain." "I know," Hayes said, "but the world doesn't. They think you're a monster." He leaned in close. "I can make this go away, Evelyn. I can get you a new identity. I can get you to Canada. You can disappear for real this time." Evelyn looked at the window. "Freedom, silence. No more fighting. Or," the General said, his eyes gleaming, "we can burn them down. We can walk into that hospital with the evidence I have, and we can show the world who the real butchers are." "I'm tired, General," Evelyn said softly. "I'm just a janitor." "No," Hayes said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it. Inside was her rank insignia, the gold oak leaves of a major. "I had these reissued this morning," Hayes said. "My son is awake, Evelyn. He wants to meet you. He wants to thank the officer who saved his life." Evelyn touched the gold metal. She felt the tears welling up, hot and fast. "What do you want to do, Major?" Hayes asked. Evelyn closed her hand around the insignia. The rasp in her voice vanished. The slump in her shoulders disappeared. She looked up, and for the first time in 4 years, the ghost of Ward 4 was gone. "I want my scalpel back," she said. The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the main atrium of St. Jude's Veterans Hospital. It was designed to be a victory lap for Senator William Sterling. The narrative was polished. The dangerous fugitive was still at large. His son was a hero who had cleaned up her mess, and he was announcing a new bill to increase security in VA hospitals, a bill that would conveniently funnel millions to a defense firm he owned shares in. The room was packed. Reporters, cameras, hospital staff, and even a few curious patients lined the balconies overlooking the atrium. Dr. Greg Sterling stood by his father, looking solemn in a fresh white coat, his arm still dramatically slung in a sling he didn't need. "We live in dangerous times," the senator boomed into the microphone, his voice echoing off the glass ceiling. "When our healers are attacked by the very people hired to sweep the floors, we know the system is broken. This woman, Evelyn Cross, is a symptom of a rot." Clang. The sound of the double doors at the back of the atrium swinging open cut through the senator's speech like a knife. Heads turned, cameras swiveled. Walking down the center aisle wasn't a fugitive in handcuffs. It was General Arthur Hayes, in full dress uniform, his chest heavy with ribbons and stars. And walking beside him, no longer in a dirty blue jumpsuit, but in a crisp, borrowed dress uniform with the gold oak leaves of a major on her shoulders, was Evelyn Cross. She wasn't limping, she was marching. A murmur of shock rippled through the room. The cameras zoomed in on her face, clean, determined, and utterly fearless. "Security!" Senator Sterling shouted, his composure cracking instantly. "Arrest that woman! She is a fugitive!" 2 security guards stepped forward, hands on their tasers, but General Hayes simply held up a hand. "Stand down, gentlemen, unless you want to explain to the Pentagon why you interfered with an active military investigation." The guards froze. The authority in Hayes's voice was absolute. Evelyn walked straight to the podium. The senator looked at her with a mix of hatred and genuine fear. Greg Sterling looked like he wanted to dissolve into the floor. "Major Cross," the senator hissed, away from the mic, "you are making a mistake. I will bury you so deep you'll never see the sun." Evelyn didn't look at him. She stepped up to the microphone. She looked out at the sea of faces, the nurses she had worked beside for months, who never knew her name, the doctors who had ignored her, the reporters who had vilified her. "My name is Major Evelyn Cross," she said. Her voice was steady, amplified through the atrium. "For the last 6 months, I have been cleaning the floors of this hospital. I have emptied your trash. I have washed your sheets. And I have watched." She turned to Greg Sterling. "I watched you, Doctor. I watched you ignore pages. I watched you falsify charts. And 2 nights ago, I watched you freeze while a soldier died on your table." "She's lying!" Greg screamed, his face red, stepping toward her. "She's crazy! She attacked me!" "Play the tape," General Hayes ordered. On the massive projection screen behind the podium, intended for the senator's PowerPoint presentation, the feed changed. It wasn't the senator's slides. It was the security footage from Trauma 1. The room went silent. They watched the janitor diagnose the tamponade. They watched Greg Sterling panic. They watched the life-saving incision. They saw, with high-definition clarity, that there was no assault. Only a rescue. They saw the moment Evelyn reached into the chest and massaged the heart back to life. "That is a doctored video," the senator yelled, trying to block the screen with his body. "Turn it off! This is a farce!" "We have more," Evelyn said calmly. The screen changed again. This time it was a scanned document. A flight log from Bagram Airfield, dated August 14th, 2020. It showed a VIP hold order, signed by Senator William Sterling, delaying the medevac of Lieutenant Cara Sterling by 45 minutes. The crowd gasped. The reporters were frantically typing, sensing the scoop of the decade. Flashbulbs erupted like staccato gunfire. "You killed your daughter, Senator," Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a whisper that roared through the speakers. "You wanted a photo op on the tarmac. She paid with her life, and you made me the scapegoat because you couldn't stand to look in the mirror." The senator stood there, mouth opening and closing, his face draining of color. The political animal had finally been cornered. The lie that had sustained his career for 4 years evaporated in the light of the truth. "And you," Evelyn turned to Greg, You deleted the footage. You planted drugs in my locker. You tried to destroy me to hide your own incompetence. You aren't a doctor, Greg. You're a liability." Greg was trembling. He looked at his father for help, but the senator was staring blankly at the flight log on the screen, his legacy incinerating in real time. "General Hayes," Evelyn said, stepping back from the mic. "They're all yours." The military police moved in, not for Evelyn, but for the Sterlings, as the senator was read his rights, shouting about conspiracies, and Greg was led away weeping. The atrium erupted. Not in applause, this wasn't a movie, but in the chaotic, electric noise of justice finally breaking the surface. Evelyn didn't stay for the interviews. She didn't wait for the apologies. She walked off the stage. Sarah Jenkins was waiting for her by the exit. The nurse was crying, smiling through the tears. "You really know how to quit a job, Evie," Sarah said. It was time for a career change, Evelyn smiled. It was the first time she had genuinely smiled in years. The weight was gone. The hip pain was just a dull ache now. "So what now?" Sarah asked. "Reinstatement? Chief of surgery?" Evelyn looked back at the hospital. She saw the patients. She saw the staff. She saw the work that still needed to be done. "General Hayes offered me my commission back," Evelyn said, "but I think I'm done with orders. There's a clinic in Detroit, inner city, underfunded. They need a surgeon who knows how to work with nothing but a scalpel and a prayer. No politics. Just medicine." "They'd be lucky to have you," Sarah said. "One thing first," Evelyn said. She walked towards the elevators. She needed to go to the ICU. Tyler Hayes was awake. He was pale, weak, and hooked up to tubes, but his eyes were open. When Evelyn walked in, he turned his head. He didn't know who she was. He just saw a woman in a dress uniform. "Mom," he whispered. Evelyn walked to the bedside. She took his hand. It was warm. The pulse was strong, regular, alive. "Rest easy, soldier," she said softly. "You're going to be just fine." Do I know you?" Tyler asked, squinting. "I had this dream. A janitor was holding my heart. She told me not to quit." Evelyn squeezed his hand. She didn't correct him. She didn't need the credit. She didn't need the fame. The beat of his heart against her fingertips was the only medal she would ever need. "Just a dream," Evelyn Cross said. "Just a ghost passing through." She turned and walked out of the room, leaving the door open behind her. She walked down the hallway, past the supply closet, past the yellow mop bucket, and out into the bright, blinding sunlight of a new day. The janitor was gone. The surgeon was back. And this time she wasn't hiding from anyone. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones we refuse to see. Evelyn Cross lost everything to save a politician's reputation, but she risked it all again to save a single soldier's life. It makes you wonder, who are the invisible people in your life? The ones cleaning the floors, serving the coffee, driving the bus? What stories are they hiding? If Evelyn's story moved you, please hit that like button. It helps us tell more stories about the unsung heroes among us. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a real-life drama. And tell us in the comments, have you ever met a hero in disguise? Thanks for watching.